Hi, welcome to RoboFlow Quickies. I am Peter van de Poele and I'm going to explain how to use RoboFlow triggers. When you install Canto RoboFlow, you get an option to install the Cumulus server plugin. This is a RoboFlow trigger that enables you to configure triggers in the Cumulus client. A trigger is something that happens, an event that happens with a record or a category, and that particular trigger then will fire some part of the application, in this case the RoboFlow trigger. This RoboFlow trigger then will store that information in an XML file, and that XML file can be used by RoboFlow. Another trigger that you might already know is the email notifier. So if you have an older version of RoboFlow, there's a RoboFlow trigger.esp file that you have to copy into your Cumulus server application installation folder. If you have Canto RoboFlow, then in the installer you get the option to install this, as you can see here. If RoboFlow and Cumulus server are not on the same computer, then you can run this installer for the RoboFlow on the RoboFlow server and for the server plugin on the Cumulus server. Once you have executed this installer, then in the folder, I'm going to show you that, in the Cumulus Workgroup or Enterprise server folder, there's an ESP folder, and here you can either copy manually the RoboFlow trigger if you have a previous version. If you have run the installer, the Canto RoboFlow installer, then there will be a new folder here in which this file is automatically cataloged. Watch out, you have to restart your Cumulus server for this to become visible. If you go to the Cumulus client to set up a trigger, you can go to catalog and say properties. Now your triggers are shown, and there's already two examples, two triggers in this catalog. If you have this plugin installed, you will have the possibility, when setting up a trigger, to select what specific event you want it to act. So in this example, maybe I'm setting up categories, so whenever the categories field of the record changes, then I want to do something. And here you have some examples of what triggers can do for you. And here you see RoboFlow trigger action. This then will appear in the list of triggers you can select. And the only option you have to set for a RoboFlow trigger is a folder. That's the target folder that he will create the XML file in, the event log, as you could call it. In this example today, for this workflow, we're going to make a hot collection workflow, a collection workflow that will automatically store the categories into a plain text field. Maybe you want your categories, your Cumulus categories, stored in a specific field whenever a new file, a new category is attached. Maybe you are using writeback, and that way this information could go into a specific XMP or IPTC field. So I created a folder that I want to use. I'm going to my RoboFlow test environment. I have RoboFlow new workflows, and I created here a folder called trigger categories. Doesn't matter how it's called, it's just a folder. It needs to be visible from the Cumulus server, and it needs to be visible from the RoboFlow server. If this is the same computer, that's very easy. If not, you might have to create some kind of share between the two servers. So I added a trigger. I want to be notified whenever something changes with the categories. I could also add a trigger whenever a file is cataloged. And so that's also something I can do. So now we're going to RoboFlow, and in RoboFlow I'm going to make a new workflow. And I'm going to do a hot collection. Store categories. New. And as I said, I'm going to use a hot collection workflow. The setup. I'm going to select the catalog. In this case, I'm working in the sample catalog. RoboFlow was not running, so he is connecting to the Cumulus installation, and it's taking. So here's my list of catalogs. I'm using the sample catalog. Normally, you could specify a query, a stored query, or simply a Cumulus query to find the records you want to process in a hot collection workflow. But in this case, there is no category, query that you can define that says, give me every record whose categories have changed. And so has changed is not something you can ask in a Cumulus query. And that's where triggers come in very handy, because you can ask the Cumulus server to fire a trigger, in this case a RoboFlow trigger action, and he can act on that. So we can leave the Cumulus query empty, and we can go here and we have an import from stored record trigger folder. So we can go here and we can look inside this trigger folder. We could specify a target process trigger folder, which means that whenever he has processed this XML file that was created by the RoboFlow trigger action, he can copy that to a new folder. Maybe you want another workflow to pick this up as well, and so you could have several workflows act on the same event. If you don't need the XML anymore, you can just leave this empty. So now he will process every record whose category has changed. You can, however, also have the Cumulus query filter on that. So maybe you only want the categories processed of records whose status is approved, or whose status is has a value OK or something like that. So then you just put here the Cumulus query, and that will be executed on top of the triggered records. In this case, I just want to do all records, and then I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to add, for instance, I'm going to set in the notes field. And what is my value? Well, we can use the inline scripting language of RoboFlow. I want a record field of the current record, and the current record or the current file or every current item RoboFlow is processing is always called hot. So it's hot and then the name of the field we want, and I'm going to say $categories. So there's different syntaxes that you can use to get only parts of the categories or the complete path of the categories, or etc. etc. In this case, I just want the categories, so he will provide me with all the categories of that specific record whenever it changes. If you want to have a clean start, if you are doing this for the first time, you could here remove this trigger, just run it, because if you don't specify Cumulus query, he does a find all. He will set it for all records, and then you can specify the trigger, which means that from that moment on, everything that changes after that will be processed. In this case, we're just gonna do it as an example with the trigger immediately. So I'm saving this, and I'm saving the workflow just like that. And you see here below, we now have this workflow appearing. I will say I'm going to start RoboFlow. All the workflows in this example are just disabled, so I can run them on demand. And what we're going to do is, maybe here we have, I'm creating a new category and I'm saying test, and I'm taking this airplane and I'm dropping it on test, which means now if we have a look in his information window, that on the category, sorry, in the keywords, we have a cat test, and here we have some keywords, etc., etc. So several things. Here's just a text that will be overwritten in there. So now we have a look in the folder. So we go to Canto, and we were in our test environment. We have a trigger folder. If we have a look, we can see that we have a record, and here 129 actually specifies that it's the record ID. If we have a look inside that specific file, is opening, yes, then we can see that we have some information that the workflow will use to search the record, to find the record. And he knows that it's in the sample catalog. He knows that it's about a certain asset with the record and the catalog information. So that's it. We're going to run the workflow. I'm just going to say start the workflow. And you see that he processed one record, the airplane. You can see that the trigger has disappeared. And if we have a look in the information window, of this record, we can see now that he said, okay, we have Cumulus Catalog as a category, we have, and then a comma, illustrations, comma, EPS, comma, etc., etc. So he stored the dollar categories. He did not store test, because we did not specify that we wanted dollar keywords as well. We could have specified categories and then we would have had both, but we only specified one. So if I now do here new category test 2, and I drop this on here, I run this specific workflow again, and we can see he processed airplane another time, information window, and now we can see that we have test 2 in here. So this was a very simple example to show you how to use RoboFlow triggers. There's plenty of possibilities of using this, so just play with it. Bye.